Hello, everyone across the country. My name is Tim Phillips. I'm president of Americans for Prosperity. What a crucial moment for our nation. The policies coming out of Washington, D.C. are fast and furious and sadly, horrifically misguided. All the taxing and spending policies and so much more. We have a very special guest to discuss these crucial policy battles with us today. And also, importantly, what you can do individually at this moment for our country and for your families, and frankly, for freedom and prosperity as well. To introduce her and to kick off the Q&A session is Jocelyn Castillo. She is with our federal affairs effort right there on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Jocelyn, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us today. She's a recognized member in Capitol Hill for her hard work, conservative principles, bipartisan outreach, and leadership to get results. She's now the ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which plays a very active role on issues that impact Americans across the country. She represents the 5th District of Washington State, and we are thrilled to have her today to talk to us about the most salient issues that are being considered in Washington, D.C., the good, the bad, and the way in which our community can help ensure that America recovers stronger than ever. As Tim mentioned earlier, in the next few months, Washington, D.C. will be making some decisions that are going to dramatically transform, quite literally, our country. The spending spree that we're seeing out of D.C. is both unprecedented and unsustainable, as well as top-down policies that are seeking to ensure that the size of government continues to increase in every aspect of our lives. And I think that we need to do something to stop that. So I would love to welcome Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers and ask you, from where you sit, obviously that there are reports that are described, and there's been a proposal that's been released by the current administration, so-called infrastructure, oftentimes labeled as a jobs package. Given some of the early signs in our economic recovery, the types of policies that we know work to get the country back on track, do you think another spending package like this is necessary at this point?
Not the approach that the president and the Democrats are taking, absolutely not. But I just want to start by saying, Jocelyn and Tim, thank you. Thank you, Americans for Prosperity, all that you are doing to engage Americans, make sure that they understand what is happening here on Capitol Hill. When you said transform America, I was reminded after President Biden addressed Congress most recently, Speaker Pelosi said, this is, quote, she said, quote, this is our once in a century opportunity to fundamentally change America. And that is unfortunately what is happening. And and although they will say it's an infrastructure package, less than 7% of the proposed $2 trillion plus in spending is actually dedicated to roads and bridges. So this is not your traditional infrastructure. This is a lot of the left's wish list. It's a lot of the Green New Deal, for example. And what we're seeing is that this is not the approach that creates jobs. You look at the jobs report from last month. It was not what people expected. People are not coming back to work. Look at inflation. The cost of everything's going up right now. Lumber, houses, cars, food, everything in a family's budget. People's are feeling pinched in their family budget. And I would just point to the formula that was working that had created an economic boom in our country. If you can remember back to before the pandemic, which I know it's hard to remember back then, but before the pandemic, our economy was booming. And it was based upon the formula of cutting taxes, reducing the regulatory burden, saying yes to American energy and better trade deals. That was the formula that had worked to create more jobs, a record low unemployment for women, for minorities, for people with disabilities, record numbers of people coming off the sidelines and getting that job, which is so foundational to a better life. So I am very concerned about the spending, the printing of money, the inflation that's taking place, which means prices are going up and is pinching the family's budget. And unfortunately, this is not the formula that's going to make our economy boom. And it's only going to delay prosperity and innovation in America.
Well said, Congresswoman. I can tell you, being out on the road, I'm on this call today from the greater Detroit suburbs. We're doing a rally here tonight to urge a couple of these Democrat House members to consider going a different direction, not just take orders from their party leadership. That first big spending bill you talked about was passed on a party line vote. And it was good for the Republicans for standing up and saying, no, this is a bad approach. As the Democrats in the House, a lot of them from really swing areas. I was in Des Moines, Iowa 3, Representative Axney. Des Moines, a very moderate swing area of the country. I know that area pretty well. Do you think at some point some of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle may begin saying, gosh, maybe we're going too far. Maybe we're going too partisan, too extreme. Do you get a sense that at some point, if we continue to talk to neighbors and folks in the communities in these districts, that we can begin convincing some of these members to say no to party leadership and the more extreme elements and do what's right for their districts? Do you get a sense of that from your colleagues? Well,
there are some signs, but we need to keep the pressure on. Speaker Pelosi is driving this train right now, and she I don't know if it's her legacy or what, but she is taking, so far in the House, it's been a take it or leave it approach. It's been a very radical socialist agenda that she is driving, and to date, she's making sure that every Democrat lines up and supports this package. So we must do more to appeal to them, and certainly in the Senate, with the Senate being tied, there's opportunities to reach across the aisle, and we're going to continue to do that. You take this infrastructure package, for example, $2.2 trillion is the proposal in the House. Now the Senate, there's some signs where they're working potentially on a bipartisan bill to put some pressure on Speaker Pelosi, which would be good. But within the infrastructure bill, there's things that sound good, like closing the digital divide, which we all want to do. The Democrats are proposing $100 billion to close the digital divide. Those kind of things, we absolutely must close the digital divide, but we need to do it in a way that's actually going to get results. We need to make sure that it's technology neutral. We need to streamline the permitting process. We need to remove the regulatory burdens. We need to make sure that we're saying yes to the technology that makes sense. And the Democrats, they're taking a one size fits all type of approach. They want one type of technology, not, in my district, for example, I have very remote, hard to serve regions, and they're not taking the approach that's actually going to solve the problem. And that's what I see in issue after issue, where it may sound good, but it's not the approach. Throwing money at a solution doesn't in and of itself solve it. Quite often it's permitting or regulatory barriers that are the biggest challenges. And that's where the government needs to get out of the way instead of just continuing to spend more money.
If folks watching right now, you can make your voice heard. Just click on that I volunteer link. It's right there on the Facebook link. Take a moment, click on that link. It'll take you about a minute, maybe a minute and 15 seconds. Make your voice heard against this tax and spend $2 trillion plus bill that the Congresswoman is just talking about, that we're discussing right now. It's a big moment, and please make sure that you're doing your part. I used to work on Capitol Hill many years ago, and every member, and I bet it's still this way today, every member got a report every day of the number of people from their district or state reaching out to them individually on given issues and whether they were for it or against it. And I'm pretty sure those members still do that today. So it makes a difference when you make your voice heard. Click that I volunteer link and make sure that your House member and your 2 U.S. senators, but especially your House member, is hearing from you before this vote takes place. It could be sometime in June or July. Jocelyn, go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. And as you mentioned, there's a lot coming at us. Our activists have been very active on the issue of healthcare as well. With recent crises impacting Americans across the country, health-wise. And so what we know here in Americans for Prosperity is that Americans want a healthcare system that affords them the choice, the control they want, flexibility and affordability they need, and the quality they deserve from medical professionals that they trust. Many right now in DC are steering away, in my opinion, from Americans' wishes and trying to pursue a government takeover of our healthcare system. Right now, this is manifested in the ongoing efforts by Democratic leaders to impose detrimental drug price controls, proposals like HR 3 that are making their way. It passed the House last year, but it's an even bigger threat this year, given that they control both chambers in the White House. And as we say here at AFP, HR 3 is simply the wrong prescription. Congresswoman, can you tell us what is in HR 3 and why would it be so detrimental to patients, particularly at a time when we think we're on the verge of breakthroughs, innovation? We saw the results of Operation Warp Speed in delivering a vaccine in record time. Why would this be the wrong proposal to lower drug pricing costs?
Right. Well, it's government price controls. I completely agree with what you said. The goal within healthcare needs to be price transparency. We need to be empowering patients. We need to restore the doctor-patient relationship to making the best decisions. That's why price transparency is so important, because then the patient will be empowered to determine where the best quality is going to be at the best price. And we also need to make sure that America continues to lead the world in curing diseases. You think about curing cancer or delaying the onset of Alzheimer's. That's what America needs to be focused on. Operation Warp Speed was a success because of American ingenuity and the public-private partnership. President Trump's leadership in Operation Warp Speed brought a vaccine forward in less than a year. It's historic. And we need to learn from that type of an approach rather than the approach that Speaker Pelosi and the majority is putting forward with price controls. So we all agree that we need to address the cost of prescription drugs. We have proposals that will do so without it being a government imposed price control of our prescription drugs. And the reason that that's the wrong approach is because it's modeled after countries like the UK or Canada, where they have longer waiting times, plus they have about half the access to prescriptions, treatments that we have in the United States of America. If you're someone in need of a life-saving drug, you want to be here in the United States of America. And the approach that the Democrats are promoting is going to stifle innovation. It's going to stifle the development of cures, continued cures in cancer, delaying onset of Alzheimer's. And that's where we need to be focusing. And unfortunately, the Democrats are taking an approach that will really stifle that type of innovation.
You and your colleagues have championed legislation that is actually bipartisan and would reduce prescription drug prices, such as the Lower Costs, More Cures Act. In my opinion, bills like that build on the success of currently Operation Warp Speed, Right to Try, and other life-changing policies that have gotten innovation and saved lives quite literally. Can you give us a sense for what is in the Lower Cost, More Cures Act and why perhaps it's a better approach to what we're seeing come out of Washington?
Yes, we want to continue to build upon Operation Warp Speed, the approach in Operation Warp Speed, the Right to Try legislation. We were seeing prescription drugs, the costs actually start to bend under the Trump administration. And so when it comes to solutions to bring down the cost of prescription drugs, we want to be bringing forward more generic and biosimilar competition so that we can get these kind of prescription drugs available and into the marketplace sooner. We want to promote price transparency. Again, because that's one of the best things that we can do to bring accountability around the cost of prescription drugs. In our legislation, we do put a cap on seniors' out-of-pocket costs for Medicare Part D, which has been a big concern within Medicare Part D. But these are the type of solutions that will impact the cost of prescription drugs in an individual's pocketbook without stifling innovation. And unfortunately, the Democrats and Speaker Pelosi, they're promoting an approach that will be a big damper on innovation. And I think especially for someone in rare diseases or or even Alzheimer's, we have put billions of dollars into research for Alzheimer's, for example. the price control approach that Speaker Pelosi is advancing would stifle. There would not be the incentive to actually do the research and continue to invest. But that's why America has led in curing diseases and better outcomes, because of that innovative approach. And so we need to fight for that. We need to fight for solutions like 21st Century Cures that the Republicans led, Cures 2.0, that would continue to bring more cures, more breakthroughs to the market sooner.
Moving away or moving back, I guess, to that spending bill we talked about earlier, Congresswoman, you mentioned something really important, that the last two jobs reports in this country have been off target. They underestimated by 750,000 jobs, the number of jobs that were going to be created last month. The projections for job creation was lowered from the month of March as well. And you mentioned inflation that's picking up dramatically across the board. And that hits the working folks working on the margins and on fixed incomes the most. But this spending bill, this infrastructure bill, and I put that infrastructure in quotation marks, it includes tax increases, right? Can you talk a little bit about those tax increases and how, given the conditions we just discussed, the inflation dramatically increasing and job creation being really sluggish, why that's especially a bad idea right now?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, before the pandemic, we had an economy that was booming. And foundational to that had been the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that President Trump and the Republicans had led in bringing down our corporate tax rate, for example. We had brought it down to 21%. Before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we had the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And it had been a competitive disadvantage. We had companies that were moving outside of the United States of America, moving their headquarters because of the tax burden that was being imposed in our country. And what the Democrats, what President Biden has said, he wants to bring that back to 28%. That's only going to stifle investment in America, stifle job creation in America. That's the exact opposite thing that we should be doing at a time when there's uncertainty and people are just getting back to work. I would also say that we need to really encourage people to get back to work. I hear from so many employers right now that they're having a hard time getting their employees to come back to work, and it's across the board. It's in hospitality, it's in timber, in manufacturing, in aerospace. We need to get people back to work, and unfortunately, the Biden administration is taking the approach of extending unemployment or continuing to pay people to stay home rather than to get back to work. In order to get our economy growing, again, I would say we need to get the government out of the way and allow the market to respond, get people back to work. We know that a job is so important in someone's life. And after a year of lockdowns and isolation that is not healthy, it's not physically healthy or mentally healthy, people need to get back to work. A job is so much more than a paycheck. It's what gives you purpose and dignity. It's the opportunity for a better life. And so when we're debating these policies, we are absolutely debating jobs in America. And we need to get back to record jobs in America, because that is what gives people the opportunity for a better life.
Folks watching, hearing the words of Congresswoman McMorris Rodgers from the state of Washington, make your voice heard. Take a moment, click that I volunteer link, tell your member of Congress, vote no against these tax increases are going to hit so many American small businesses that are struggling to get this economy going again. Vote no on this spending and all of the boondoggles coming out of DC, this Green New Deal, which we haven't even gotten into yet. There's so much just terrible policy in this spending legislation that hurts average Americans and only builds up, frankly, special interest in Washington, D.C. So make your voice heard. Congresswoman, would you take a moment? Because I know there are folks watching right now who may be thinking, gosh, my member knows how they're going to vote. It probably doesn't matter but would you take a moment to let them know, A, if you are doing the right thing, it's a pick me up to hear, keep doing it. And if you're against them, it's good to know, hey, folks are watching and it may matter in the election next year. Can you take a moment on that and why it's important?
Absolutely. I just, again, I'll say thank you to all that you do to help educate and get people to make their voices heard. It absolutely makes a difference. We absolutely need to hear from people. Republicans and Democrats need to hear your voice. This is a battle right now, and I believe that it's a battle fundamentally between freedom and socialism, and we need to make sure that freedom-loving Americans are making their voices heard. America has done more to lift people out of poverty, raise the standard of living more than any other country in the world. We can celebrate American leadership, American innovation, leading the world in every industry, every field. And in order to keep that going, we must engage, we must make our voices heard, and we must fight the radical socialist policies around the Green New Deal, Medicare for all. It's really a government knows best approach, government controlling your lives, controlling the car you drive, the home you live in. That is not the American way. America believes in trusting people to make the best decisions for themselves. That's freedom and opportunity for all. And it's a fight worth having. So yes, absolutely, make your voices heard. Thanks for all you do.
Jocelyn, go right ahead.
Congresswoman, an issue that perhaps is not as as much in the news these days, but one that we think can garner enough bipartisan support and has had incredible impact, and I know that you've championed, has been the flexibilities that we enjoyed, and an ability to be able to meet the moment with things like telehealth expansion. Can you tell us how optimistic you are about the recent temporary flexibilities potentially becoming permanent, something that our community is very interested in seeing, and how that could improve access to care, particularly in rural areas, should we see the telehealth expansions that we're enjoying now potentially last longer than the public health emergency?
Yes, telehealth is it's great technology that has the potential to really revolutionize the delivery of healthcare, the access to healthcare, no matter where you live, as you mentioned, in rural, remote regions. It was jump-started during the pandemic because Congress, in the CARES Act, the very first bill that we passed within days of the pandemic being declared a national emergency, the telehealth provisions were included, and we extended. We increased the reimbursements, and it extended or addressed some of the barriers to telehealth, and it's been well received by patients and by providers. And I think about the increased mental health issues and challenges that people have been facing. It gives you access to providers from the comfort of your own home. And so I do believe that this is an area where you will see bipartisan support to move forward, to make permanent some of these telehealth provisions. But it's also an opportunity for us to celebrate American ingenuity and creativity, and in continuing to increase our quality of life as a country. And that's what we should be focusing on, not tearing down and dismantling, but continuing to improve that quality of life and export our solutions and our technology to others around the world, rather than the approach right now that's being taken that I really believe jeopardizes our standard of living and our quality of life.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap this up today. I want to ask Congresswoman one more question, though. I know these are challenging times. We've discussed some of those challenges, and frankly, with Jocelyn, we've also discussed some of the promising possibilities on healthcare. But I know you're an optimistic person at heart. Give us a sense before we wrap this up why, even though we've got challenges in this country, certainly on the policy level in Washington, D.C. right now, but give us a sense of why, as you travel your district, and I know the country, you're still pretty darn optimistic about the future of this country of ours.
I absolutely am. My mantra for 2021 has been that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that's been the American way. And I just go back to our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, the preamble to the Constitution that says, "We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union." And we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. But that search for a more perfect union continues. And coming out of the pandemic, I am hopeful that it will be a new era of innovation and entrepreneur spirit, that people will have these ideas to continue to improve services or new products, and they'll start a business. That's my hope. I'm also very hopeful that we have a majority on the Supreme Court that are constitutional conservatives. That gives me hope. I have hope in this greatest experiment in self-governance and the importance of states and governors and state legislatures that are fighting back on some within the federal government that want to have a one-size-fits-all approach driven out of Washington, D.C. and the federal government. It gives me hope when I see these states, the laboratories of democracy that are coming up with their own solutions and pushing back, governors and attorney generals and state legislatures pushing back on the one-size-fits-all from Washington, D.C. All of that to say, you make a difference. And it's important that you make your voices heard. I'm encouraged with the people that are stepping up to run for school board and city council in Eastern Washington. I'm encouraged by the freshmen that were elected to the House of Representatives in 2020. It's kind of the untold story, but we picked up 15 seats in 2020 when the media and the Democrats were saying that the Republicans were going to lose anywhere from 15 to 24 seats. Instead, we picked up 15 seats. We had a record number of women elected, 20 Republican women elected in 2020. We now have 31, it's a record. But all of our freshmen, they're just superstars. They are freedom fighters. And you know what? That is going on all over the country. We are fighting for freedom. It's a fight worth having. And I'm encouraged that I believe that at the, America's fundamentals, our Constitution and this whole experiment in self-governance, that the principles in which America was founded and that have resulted in us leading and being prosperous, we're going to continue to fight for them, and they are going to win the day. That's my hope.
That's beautiful. That was Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers from the great state of Washington out west. Jocelyn Castillo from our Capitol Hill team at Americans for Prosperity. And I'm Tim Phillips. And you heard it from the Congresswoman. Let's do our part. This freedom, this prosperity, this great country we've enjoyed, it doesn't just exist by a hereditary fashion for years and years to come. We have to work for it. We have to fight for it. The prosperity and freedom, we can do it in a civil way, a respectful way. But nevertheless, let's go out and fight to make sure that we preserve and protect this great republic of ours. Get involved. Click that I Volunteer link. Join us as we're on the road. I'm in Michigan tonight, Texas tomorrow. We're going to get this thing going. I'll tell you something. We're going to stop this tax and spend bill coming out of Washington. We're going to do it. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to get it done. Let's do it together. Thank you all very much. Good afternoon.